As we all impatiently wait for the next Spider-Verse movie, let's take a look at what may be the best Miles Morales figure we've gotten yet. Hey y'all, and welcome back to Carbon Scoring, the best place for comics, history, and action figures. And today, we are taking a look at the Mezco 112 series Miles Morales from Across the Spider-Verse. Now, Miles is arguably the most important comic character that has been created since the year 2000. I really can't think of anybody who has had the type of impact that this character has had. Spider-Gwen would maybe be a close, not even a really close second, but, a second. But this is a guy who took over the mantle of the most popular hero in the Marvel Universe, starting out in the Ultimate Universe, and has now crossed over not only into the main 616 Comics universe, but he's the star of some of the absolute best Spider-Man movies ever made, and certainly Across the Spider-Verse falls into that category. So we got to take a look at this thing. Now, Mezco has been doing their 112 series for quite a while. And one of the things that I like is that they have kept this basic package design throughout their entire series. So if you're an inbox collector, these things fit nicely on a shelf. They have a great, logo and side view here with the 112 on it. It actually matches so that whichever way you want to display it, you can. Really cool that this logo actually and the Spider-Man logo have a little bit of a gloss to them so that they sort of stand out. Same thing here. You can see the gloss over this. Now, we recently looked at their Silver Age Doc Ock figure, and the Doc Ock on the main box was this kind of highlighted, whereas here, Miles just fits in with the background. But what a background. Look at how gorgeous that color is and that great art right there on the package. On the top, you've got pretty classic Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. And like I said, the backs have been incredibly consistent with their product images of the figure that you get, all of the different accessories, and then some professional photography of the figure itself. So, if you're an in-package collector, these are nice because you don't have to ruin the package to pull it out. You can pull this out, display it, keep the package, put it back in. Everything is completely replaceable without having to cut through any kind of plastic or anything like that. So I think that that's actually a big bonus. But hey, man, I am not an in-package collector. So let's get this bad boy out, take a look at him, and see exactly what we've got. So again, Mezcos come really well packaged where the trays kind of all collapse on top of themselves so that it keeps everything really neat. You can see here in this top tray, you have the 3 extra heads, and then of course the head on the figure, the different hands, and most of the different web effects that come with it. If you pull the trays apart, this is the top tray. In the bottom tray, you get that classic Mezco display stand, which we're going to look at really closely today, as well as a spider sense effect and a comic book. So kind of one of the first times that we've seen that with these. They also, which I think is really nice, they give you a Ziploc bag. So if you're somebody who wants to put all the extra hands, the extra accessories into a Ziploc and not save it, it comes with this where you can actually label the figure. So just really nice, smartly packaged stuff. So let's take a look at what we get. So here is the base Miles figure, and as you can see, this is his costume from Across the Spider-Verse. Now, it has a ton of similarities to the Into the Spider-Verse costume, particularly the logo on the chest looks very similar, but there are some distinct differences between the two. First off, that Into the Spider-Verse suit was actually just a regular Peter Parker Spider-Man red and blue suit that Miles spray painted black. If you look closely on those figures, you can see the web lines that were still on the suit, just painted over with the graffiti logo on the front. This suit is a different material. You can see there's a little bit more of a pleather, kind of leather component here and down the arms compared to the more mesh material that makes up the rest of the body. And of course, finger just came off. Let's be careful with these. These things are so small. We're going to look at the hands here in a minute, but you have to be so careful with these pegs. It popped right back on, but you have to be really cautious with those. One of the huge difference design-wise of the Across the Spider-Verse suit for Miles is this red stripe that goes from the red on the palm of his hand all the way down the middle to, about the top of his calf. And of course, that's on both sides. And that's something that I think looks really stylistic in the artwork where he's moving and flexing and bending. And so it kind of sneaks in and out of the frame. You can sort of see it in some angles, but then it disappears in others. Now, because these are the Mafex 112 figures, they have what is essentially a cloth costume. So this mesh material is very much a cloth right here with more of a rubber overlay for that spider on the back. And then there's patches of the more pleathery material that we see on the arms, here on the back, on the mid torso, and then coming down sort of the front of the shins has that as well. Also, that's the material of the red stripe. Now, a lot of people get concerned with good reason that if you keep one of these figures in a posed position for a lengthy period of time, that this more leathery plastic material is going to flex and bend and crack and stay in that position. And I don't know how to argue with that. I think it is a really valid concern. It certainly happens with Hot Toys figures, and I think it probably would happen with Mezco. So it's just something that if you're somebody who gets your figures out and poses them in a display, you have to know that you run the risk of that long term. Now, the good thing about this is this fits really tight, which is super important for this character because one of the hallmarks of this figure is just how thin the frame is for Miles. Miles is taller. You can definitely tell that he had grown between Into the Spider-Verse and Across the Spider-Verse. That's reflected here, but he's still very, very thin. And if this costume were baggy, like some of the earliest Mezco 112 figures, particularly that Spider-Man 2099 figure, if it were baggy, it really wouldn't work. So the fact that the suit fits super tight on this really thin frame, I think is a big time plus for it. So that's really good. Now, you worry about how that crunch is going to do long term. Again, this popped right off, but it pops back on, thankfully. The other thing is they do a smart thing that I think they do a really great job with, which is this is plastic. So the neck and the head is plastic. Now, part of that means that it makes it really easy to pop on and off so that you can change the different head pieces. But the other part is plastic is gonna bunch up. If you try to do a mask that's cloth, there has to be a seam line. And so this does not have a seam. So it's really, really clean there. Same thing for the hands. The cloth does not go over the hands, which allows us to constantly change those, and down at the ankles. Even though we don't really change the feet on this figure, the fact that this ankle joint isn't encumbered by the cloth costume is a super nice touch. So really good. Now, as we look at him, you can see for a cloth costume figure, it has the kind of bend that you would expect with a Marvel Legends, with any other, super articulated 6-inch figure. In fact, I mean, he bends about as well as an import figure. And some of that is because the dual joint here, that you have the joint at the neck, both at the base of the skull and down at his torso. So really, really nice. Pretty good crunch. Maybe I'd like for that to be a little bit more. Goes back pretty well. But overall, pretty nice. Let's start by looking at some of the different hands that came with this figure, because I think he has 5 different sets. These are fists. Yeah, and these are official. They're never going to stay on. You have to watch if the cloth kind of bunches up. It sort of interferes with the connection point. So these are just straight fists. I think he does have some grabbing hands, but these are just straight up punchy sort of fists. Let's look at the next set and see how they look. As I said, aside from the fists that come with the figure, there's 4 additional sets. Classic wall crawlers, classic thwippers, open hands, and these actually allow for him to grab stuff. So we'll go through each one of these individually. I'm a big fan of the casual open hands. And so that's what these are. The nice thing about them is they can be used in so many different poses. You can have him down by his side, and they look so much more natural than the fists do to me. You can have them up in sort of a surprised pose. And look, one thing you can see, they're not symmetrical. On the right hand, the fingers are kind of curved down a little bit, whereas they're splayed much more fully open on the left hand. Plus, the design of the costume with the black on the back of the hand and then the red on the palm really stands out. So if you've got him kind of with one hand down, but the other one up, it makes that hand just really bounce. And this is going to be a problem the whole time. I think it's because the cloth comes up really close. Now it does, they pop right on. So it's not like it's a major issue, but you can see it's happened, I think, 4 times already simply filming this. So these are the casual, relaxed hands. Let's compare those to the wall crawling hands because a lot of times people just kind of consider those to be interchangeable, but they're definitely not. There's a clear difference between them, and I think we'll be able to see that here very quickly. So really happy with these wall crawling hands. The difference is, yes, they're splayed out, much like the ones that we just looked at, but you can see that pressure point. Look at how these have very clearly where there is pressure being applied to the fingertips and it creates that bend in the fingers. It's really apparent on this hand. You can really see how the fingertip itself looks as though it's pressed down against the surface, and then that creates that push against the rest of the hand. These are distinct. I mean, these are definitely different fingers than what we saw. Now, a lot of times, if you're in just kind of a downward pose or you've got him kind of leaping through the sky, you could use these. They work that way, but there's definitely much more of a pressure with it. And because the animated style lends itself to a little bit of exaggeration, I think that they showed that. These are, slightly exaggerated in their look, but still really, really cool. And again, when you've got that black suit with these red hands that come up near his face, it just looks really, really cool. I suppose you could have a Spidey without thwippers, but boy, that would be a really, really crappy Spider-Man figure. These, again, it's the contrast that makes them, where the fingers, the black fingers on the back, where they bend over to create the thwip, really gives us that red on black contrast with these. Classic, typical, absolutely perfect thwippy hands, just exactly what you want to see. And we'll see them in conjunction with some of his web effects here momentarily, but really nice, super well done. And lastly, you've got the grabbers. And again, I'm actually thankful that these are not symmetrical. The left hand has the thumb up so that it can be kind of pressing against the web, whereas the right hand is just a classic fist with the hole there so that the spider web effects can go through. So pretty cool. The thumb up I think is actually, kind of neat because he has a ton of different web effects and we're going to see how to utilize these all together. So that's our 5 sets of hands. Let's look at the other 3 alternate heads. This is obviously the base head with the giant big eyes. Hard to go wrong with that, but I think we're going to find that some of the others are actually pretty cool. We have seen different artists in the comics utilize Spider-Man's eyes to give a means of expression, to really kind of change and shape the figure. It's something that has become much more prevalent with the movies. The MCU Spider-Man, the eyes actually have like floating discs where they can kind of focus in and focus out. Whereas in the animated, because everybody has these magic suits where the mask just kind of appear and disappear, you can really take that to an extreme. And this is a great example of going super, super squinty with the eyes. It really connotes a totally different emotion with the character rather than the big bug eyes. And I like it. It was a technique in the comics that was used probably some of the most by Eric Larson when he took over after Todd McFarlane in the 90s. But then future artists like Humberto Ramos certainly used it as well. But it's a technique that, in a subtle way, goes all the way back to the beginning. Even Steve Ditko would alter the eye shape just slightly, not nearly like what we saw with Larson or Ramos, but it's certainly something that we've seen all the way through. When you're telling an animated story and you have a character that's in a mask, it's pretty vital that you're able to convey changes in emotion. And certainly the changing of the eyelet pieces is one of the most effective ways to do that on the screen. Otherwise it's going to be like those early Sam Raimi movies where as quickly as he could, Peter had his mask off so that, Tobey Maguire's face was there, because it's really hard to act with a mask on. But in animation, because you can use these eyelet pieces and change them around, it certainly makes a big difference. You also can have the hands just constantly fall out. For that time, it was the right hand and not the left hand. But that's the squinty-eyed version. Let's take a look at another one. The length of time between Spider-Verse movies has certainly been frustrating to all of us as fans. I think Into the Spider-Verse came out in 2018, whereas Across the Spider-Verse was 2022, and I think we're hoping for 2026, maybe 2027 for Beyond the Spider-Verse. But the one benefit of that is we've actually seen Miles grow. He was very much a kid, like an early teenager when we went into the Spider-Verse. But now you get a little bit more mature Miles. His hair is longer, his body is longer and leaner. And this is kind of a mid-teen, like a 16, maybe 17-year-old Miles. Now, obviously, the storyline is going to continue directly from the end of the ending of Across the Spider-Verse. I mean, it ended with one of the better cliffhangers I've ever seen, something that's awfully brutal to make us wait 4 or even 5 years for. I'm old enough to remember what it felt like back in 1980 for Han to be frozen in carbonite and for Luke's hand to not fall off, get chopped off, and for Darth Vader to say, "Luke, I'm your father," and then you don't know anything for 3 more years. Do you know how big a deal that is in kid time to go from the age of 10 to the age of 13 not knowing what the hell happened to Han Solo? It's pretty damn criminal, if you ask me. So, that little aside, it's good to see Miles grow up. And with this head, you can definitely see a change from Into the Spider Verse, but he's still a kid. It still has that kind of joyful, youthful look. He's maybe not fully confident here. This is still a little bit of, I'm kind of learning how things are going, Miles. His eyebrows are up. There's still a little bit of childlike wonder in this face. I would imagine that when we get to the final figures for the third movie, we're going to see an even different, much more serious, much more in control, much more the boss version of Miles. But I like this one. This one's really nice. I saved my favorite version for last. One of the things that I always loved about Spider-Man growing up, the original Spider-Man, Peter Parker Spider-Man in the 616 comics, was he could find the joy even while being beaten down, even while dealing with the old Parker luck. He still found happiness and joy in the books. And there's a childlike fun to Spider-Man. And that's something that's hard to do after 60 years of continuity. And so one of the ways that Marvel kind of handled that was they created the Ultimate Universe. And so Brian Michael Bendis and Mark Bagley got a chance to basically rewrite Spider-Man's story, bring him back to his teenage years, not rush it through, spend time with him as a kid and a teen, and it was brilliant. It's one of my favorite ongoing comic stories of all time. But there came a point where even that Peter had been beaten down by all the adventures, by all the loss, by all of everything that goes into being a superhero, and he had lost a little bit of the fun-natured aspect to him. And that's where Miles comes in. Miles still has it. And this head sculpt really shows that. I love that happy, joyful look. The asymmetry of the eyes really works here. And I'm a sucker for the half mask. That's something that I've always loved. My pizza Spider-Man, I still display it with the half mask face because it's something about the joy that it brings to the character. So this is one that, if this guy makes it down into my Spider-Verse display, which I'm feeling like he probably will, he might be wearing this mask as he's doing it. Let's take a look at some of Miles's web accessories. They're really easy to use. You take the hands off and they clip right onto there. But something that they didn't just simply reuse old Spider-Man webs, these are unique for Miles. And what I think that you can see with this is they all come with this kind of heavy glob of webbing up at the front, and then much more of a flowing, looping look. Same thing here. You see that big glob that has weight to it. And so, unlike just kind of your classic just spitting out a straight line, because of the weight that these have on the front, they tend to come out, maybe slower, maybe a little bit more globby, maybe a little bit more flowing. And that works so well with the artwork. So, let's clip some of these on and see how they look with Miles using them. Yeah, you can see how the weight of it kind of causes them to sort of shoot out with a little bit more heft to it. Now, these are not bendy wire, so they are not posable on their own. We recently got an awesome Mafex Daredevil where the billy club, the wire, you could bend it and pose it how you wanted to. This is pretty preset. I mean, it's got a little bit of flex, but it really wants to be in this specific position. And as you guys have watched me struggle with the hands pop off, you can imagine that trying to keep this on with another, kind of compartment right here in front of it is a little bit challenging. But let's look at a couple of more and see how they look as well. Yeah, I like this. I like kind of the six web action. Like Miles is like really kind of letting it all out on this one. And you can see they each sort of have their own weight to them. You can see some of these are kind of just simply arcing, with the one in the middle has a little bit of a swirl to it. You get actually three different kind of looks to the other side. But when you load this up, you get like a really like blasting out Miles effect. Pretty cool. I'm not sure that I have a display where this would completely work, but just sitting here holding them and looking at them, it definitely looks pretty cool. I spoke too soon. I opened up the second package because we were going to look at the display stand, and there's one more web in there that is really, really long. And this one is a bendy wire web. So it actually has kind of the globs on both ends, but this is one that you can use with the holding, the gripping hands, and then be able to spin it and swirl it any way that you want to. So when it comes time to posing, we'll get this one out and take a look and see how cool we can make it look. Very nice that they included this in the package. It was folded in half over in the second packaging. Very, very cool. For years, I have raved that Mezco's 112 line makes the best stands in the business, and I will definitely stand by that. They each come with these round bases that have a gorgeous painted logo on them, and you can see this one's kind of a matte finish, which is really cool. They have a foot peg, and the figures do have a peg in the bottom of their heel, so if you wanted to simply have them standing, you can, but if you take the back of the flight stand, you can push the little peg out and it leaves just an octagonal hole, which is perfect for the flight stand. And with a character like Spider-Man, you're definitely going to want to use the flight stand. And one of the things that I love about these is they are stiff and firm right out of the package. You don't have to sit there and get out a little tiny screwdriver. They work right away and they can hold a lot of weight. So again, these are great. Tell you what, why don't we get Spidey up on the stands, put him up on the spinner rack, take a look at some poses with him, and see how these things work in action. So overall, this figure is not without its faults. I have some concerns about the long-term durability of the more pleathery parts of the plastic. The cloth costume and the plastic costume do slightly restrict the articulation, but not significantly so. I mean, as you can see, we've still been able to get him into some really, really great Spidey poses. The connections at the wrist joints have been really fragile. We've watched the hands fall off multiple times, but in a static pose on your shelf, I don't think that's going to be a major issue. The pluses are This is a really good looking Miles figure. He's on the right body. It fits. It's really tight. The red and the black are vibrant and they really pop. The alternate heads are fantastic and did a great job with color matching the reds on the costume with on the plastic parts. There's really a seamless look between the cloth costume and the more plastic parts of it. Articulation, I think, is really good. I love what we're doing here. And I think I'm going to switch this guy out. I think this is going to be, for now, the primary Miles down in my Across the Spider-Verse display. But who cares what I think? What do you guys think? Let me know if you're all in on this figure, if you think that this is the best version of Miles Morales from Across the Spider-Verse. And as always, for the best in comics history and action figures, subscribe to Carbon Scoring.